Vivemos em uma época exponencial, de inovação e oportunidades, mas marcada por enormes desafios coletivos. Populações em vulnerabilidade, recursos naturais exauridos, pessoas desconectadas de propósito ou motivação, problemas sistêmicos, interligados e interdependentes. É hora de nos perguntarmos qual é o papel das nossas organizações, empresas e governos. Mudar as regras do jogo. Precisamos de lideranças conectadas para a construção de soluções sistêmicas, preparadas para inovar de forma colaborativa e eficiente para superarmos o modelo no qual a sociedade serve a economia rumo a uma cultura na qual a economia nutre o todo. Um sistema que redefine os papéis do Estado, das empresas e da sociedade civil organizada, a fim de criarmos vínculos de confiança e gerarmos bens públicos globais. O Agente Muda é uma comunidade que ativa a potência coletiva, conecta e instrumentaliza lideranças sistêmicas comprometidas com um mundo mais equitativo e regenerativo. Juntos, para encontrar alternativas reais e aplicáveis e escalar soluções sistêmicas. Agente Muda. Líderes que mudam as regras do jogo.
Olá! Bom dia, pessoal! Muito bem-vindas e bem-vindos. Todos me escutam bem? Se sim, dá um joinha aí. Isso! Bom, primeiro de tudo, queremos saber como vocês estão chegando, então vocês puderem deixar uma palavra aí no chat. Tô curiosa, tô animado, tô querendo saber como vai ser, só para a gente sentir como tá aí o grupo chegando. Bem-vindos e bem-vindas à primeira aula aberta, então, da comunidade de prática muda. Hoje é a nossa primeira aula para os inscritos, né, do programa. A gente está recebendo aqui o Stewart Wallis como convidado, mas antes da gente começar, né, a apresentar ele dar a aula dele, a gente vai falar aqui sobre alguns combinados, que nem alguns acordos, né, que nem a gente falou no último evento, que estava lá, e depois a gente vai falar um pouquinho sobre a comunidade, né, o que a comunidade é, vamos apresentar um pouco a comunidade, eu vou chamar o Marcel para falar daqui a pouco, e aí então a gente vai entrar na nossa primeira aula, então só para vocês saberem um pouquinho como vai ser o dia de hoje. Bom, combinados então, para a gente começar, se vocês puderem deixar a câmera ligada para a gente poder ver as reações de vocês, poder já começar a identificar os rostinhos e se conhecer, associar o nome às feições. O microfone no mudo, né, que a gente está aqui numa sala grande com muita gente, a gente sabe que às vezes está em casa, faz barulho, faz parte do home office, né, de trabalhar em casa, às vezes tem um barulho ou outro, então deixar o microfone no mudo. As perguntas hoje vão ser no chat, a gente vai ter um momento de interação no começo, que a gente vai conversar e trocar, mas as perguntas elas vão ficar no chat, então quando o Stewart estiver dando a aula dele, a gente vai estar facilitando as perguntas, a gente vai apresentar todo mundo, mas a Marina Gataz e o Samuel Emílio estão aqui, né, para fazer essa facilitação, eu vou apresentar eles mais tarde. A gente tem tradução simultânea, a Fernanda está aqui, para quem está vendo aí as pessoas que estão com o fundo do mundo aqui, o pessoal da organização. Então, se você precisar de tradução simultânea, saiba que é só ir na barra ali embaixo no Zoom, tem um globinho escrito interpretação ou interpretation, e lá você consegue escolher o canal português ou inglês, que você consegue trocar de língua, caso seja necessário, mais para frente, quando a gente fazer a transição para o inglês. E para você que vai compartilhar, tá aí no Instagram, quer compartilhar um pouquinho sobre a jornada, não esquece de marcar @agente.muda, eu vou colocar aqui no chat para vocês terem bonitinho, marcar no Stories, já começar, né, a movimentar a nossa comunidade, mostrar aqui a nossa aula, os conteúdos e compartilhar tudo que a gente está aprendendo juntos. Bom, então esses são os combinados de hoje, tudo certo para todo mundo, qualquer problema que vocês tiverem pode me chamar no chat, estou aqui com vocês, né, facilitando aqui o evento. Meu nome é Thaís Mantovani, né, para quem não me conheceu no último evento, mas está me conhecendo agora, Eu trabalho no Sense Lab, que está responsável pelo conteúdo e a correalização aqui, junto com a Dynamo e tantas outras organizações incríveis que estão fazendo parte, que o Marcel vai agradecer todas elas aqui no nosso evento. Bom, vou chamar o Marcel, então, que é empreendedor de impacto, é cofundador da Dynamo Lab e do Sistema B Brasil, para apresentar um pouco da comunidade de prática e falar um pouco da Masterclass que a gente vai ter hoje, antes da gente passar a bola para o Stewart, para a Marina e para o Samuel. Marcel, está com você.
Obrigado, Thaís. Bom dia a todas e todos. Super feliz de começar essa semana com vocês. A nossa primeira Masterclass, ou segunda Masterclass, na verdade, mas a primeira desse grupo fechado, em que hoje nós vamos falar sobre economia do bem-estar. Em primeiro lugar, queria agradecer a todos pela participação, pela confiança, por aceitar ser parte desse grupo pioneiro, um grupo piloto, em que a gente, de maneira bastante embrionária, vem começando esse grupo, e todos vocês são agentes MUDA, né? Então, pessoas que têm ocupado posições de liderança, posições de influência, posições de realização, de grande contribuição para a gente construir um outro Brasil, um outro mundo possível, e o sonho desse programa, a grande visão desse programa, a gente construir uma comunidade de práticas e lideranças sistêmicas que mudam as regras do jogo, para a gente, de fato, construir um sistema econômico mais equitativo e regenerativo. Esse programa tem 3 etapas. Nós estamos agora, hoje, concluindo uma etapa importante do programa, que é a etapa preparatória para o nosso encontro imersivo. Então, nessa primeira etapa, nós tivemos um primeiro encontro aberto com muitas pessoas, mais de 200 pessoas se conectaram ao vivo, mais de 500 pessoas se conectaram depois, que foi o primeiro encontro com o WEAll, em que nós conversamos sobre economia regenerativa. Vocês vão receber em alguns dias mais um encontro, e aí vai ser assíncrono, né? Foi um encontro gravado com 2 personalidades também muito relevantes para o nosso campo, para a nova economia, né? A Célia Cruz, diretora executiva do ICE, que tem feito uma contribuição extremamente relevante para o fortalecimento do ecossistema de investimentos e negócios de impacto no Brasil. Ela dialogou, moderou, facilitou uma conversa incrível com o Sir Ronald Cohen, também uma personalidade muito relevante no mundo, mas sobretudo no Reino Unido, criando a indústria do venture capital lá, criando instrumentos de impacto como Social Impact Bonds, criando organizações relevantes como Social Finance, Big Society Capital, que trabalhou com o governo britânico na criação de todo esse ecossistema, na criação do WEAll UK, né? Ele foi um empresário que criou uma das primeiras empresas B no Reino Unido, a Bridge Ventures. Também foi o filantropo que ajudou a fazer o capital semente para a criação do movimento de empresas B lá, com a criação do WEAll UK, e hoje tem feito trabalho incrível também na Universidade de Harvard, com o trabalho da contabilidade de impacto, né? Então, nesse próximo encontro, que vai ser assíncrono, nós vamos falar sobre economia de impacto. E hoje nós vamos falar sobre economia do bem-estar. E logo mais a Thaís vai apresentar melhor, junto com o Samuel e com a Marina, o nosso grande inspirador de hoje, facilitador, um grande pensador das novas economias. Stewart Wallis vai nos inspirar muito sobre a economia do bem-estar, né? E como instrumentos, como o índice de bem-estar, por exemplo, podem revolucionar a maneira como a gente escreve e redefine as regras do jogo para essas novas economias. E nós vamos ter outras conversas também mais adiante, né? Nós temos o Heinrich Sahan, do Dundee Economics Action Lab, do WEAll, que é a organização fundada por Kate Allworth, grande pensadora de Dundee Economics, também estará conosco, e nós vamos ter Pedro Tarek, cofundador do Sistema B, e vai também nos inspirar muito sobre modelos sistêmicos, e tudo isso é como uma espécie de uma preparação para os nossos próximos dias, que aí começa a segunda etapa do Agente MUDA, em que nós teremos uma imersão 9, 10 e 11, todos vocês já estão se preparando, recebendo detalhes logísticos, detalhes de conteúdo, detalhes de preparo para esses 3 dias de encontro que nós teremos. Todo o trabalho que nós temos feito preparando ali um momento de 3 dias de construção de conexões, de vínculos de confiança, de colaboração, né? Então, diverso, nós mapeamos, identificamos, selecionamos, convidamos, e vocês, com muita coragem, com muita confiança, aceitaram ser parte disso. Então, nós temos pessoas que vêm da gestão pública, nós temos pessoas que vêm do setor empresarial, nós temos empreendedores, executivos, nós temos pessoas que vêm da sociedade civil organizada, nós temos lideranças comunitárias, nós temos, enfim, um perfil extremamente diverso, e a gente aplicou nessa diversidade do grupo muitas lentes de diversidade, né? Diversidade de gênero, diversidade de raça, socioeconômica, diversidade geográfica, né? Alguns a gente conseguiu harmonizar mais, outros menos, mas vocês vão entender e vão conhecer melhor, com profundidade, esse grupo na próxima semana aqui em São Paulo, lá na Casa Cozy. Então essa é a segunda etapa. E nós temos uma terceira etapa do programa, que ela emerge a partir da imersão, que é justamente a construção dessas práticas conjuntas, o que vai nos permitir influenciar mudança sistêmica, né? Criar uma nova cultura, uma nova norma, um novo jeito de pensar e de fazer na gestão pública, redefinindo o papel do Estado, das empresas, redefinindo o papel da sociedade civil organizada na construção desse outro mundo possível, desse outro sistema possível. Então, essa é a introdução que eu queria nos relembrar e dar as boas-vindas a todos vocês, e também agradecer mais uma vez a Marina, o Samuel e o Stewart por toparem fazer essa masterclass e nos inspirar, nos instrumentalizar e nos trazer elementos para o desenvolvimento da próxima semana. Thaís, eu passo de volta para você, e no final eu volto para a gente poder celebrar e reconhecer todos aqueles que fizeram esse dia, essa manhã acontecer. Obrigado.
Obrigada, Marcel. Bom, vamos lá, então, começar o dia de hoje. Marcel fez uma introdução linda, né, para a gente entender como que é a jornada como um todo muda, né, que ela começa aqui, a gente está esquentando. Ixi, fiquei muda. Voltei. Dá para me ouvir agora? Ótimo. Então, obrigada pela introdução, Marcel, que deu uma visão, né, ampla de como que a comunidade está começando a esquentar, a se formar agora, mas ela tem um longo caminho e isso depende de todos nós, né, da nossa colaboração aqui juntos. E para começar, então, essa colaboração, a gente começar a se conhecer aos pouquinhos, sentir um pouco o grupo, a gente vai fazer uma dinâmica um pouco mais divertida, diferente, para começar com o tema de hoje, e depois a gente vai partir para a aula. Mas a gente quis começar com essa interação entre vocês, né, para a gente poder, de alguma forma, começar a conhecer cada um. Então, aqui no chat a gente já está sentindo ali como que cada um está chegando de sentimento, e agora a gente vai começar a sentir como que está cada um relacionado ao tema da aula de hoje, né, da masterclass de hoje. E o tema é o que é uma economia, né, que é uma economia melhor para as pessoas e para o planeta. Então, como seria essa economia se ela colocasse em primeiro lugar, né, como objetivo final, como até a sua métrica, o bem-estar das pessoas e do planeta? E para isso, a gente vai começar a fazer um exercício no Miro, não sei quem já usou, mas eu vou ensinar e tá tudo certo. E quem não conseguiu usar a plataforma, tá tudo bem também, pode escrever aqui no chat para a gente, e a gente de alguma forma incluir lá no Miro também. Então fica tranquilo, se a tecnologia der algum bugzinho, não der certo, tá tudo bem. Então a gente vai entrar no Miro, vou compartilhar aqui minha tela, vou mostrar para vocês, e lá a gente vai escolher uma imagem que representa essa economia, né, que é uma economia que considera o bem-estar das pessoas e do planeta. Eu já vou passar o link para todo mundo poder entrar, por enquanto só fica aqui comigo que eu estou explicando como funciona. Então, você vai entrar aqui nessa plataforma online, vai colocar o seu nome, vai ter o acesso. Você pode pegar uma foto no Google, então digitar aqui no Google, por exemplo, abraços, né, uma economia de bem-estar, merece abraços. E aí você entra aqui, escolhe uma imagem, e aí nessa imagem você pode pegar ela e fazer uma cópia, só copiar, e copiando a imagem você consegue colar no mural normalmente. Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V. Opa! Ctrl C, Ctrl V, você consegue colar essa imagem aqui. Então, você pode escolher uma imagem que você deseje, ou você pode escolher uma imagem aqui do baú de imagens que eu já pré-selecionei para ajudar quem não conseguir. Então, aqui tem várias imagens diferentes, você pode selecionar e só jogar uma imagem para cá, por exemplo, se aqui o foguete da NASA fizer sentido para você como uma economia de bem-estar ou para o planeta e para as pessoas. Então, coloquei algumas imagens aleatórias aqui do lado, ou senão você pode buscar uma imagem que faça sentido para você no Google. E aí a gente vai fazer, então, uma nuvem de imagens que direcionam aí o nosso sentimento para uma economia de bem-estar para as pessoas e para o planeta. Vou jogar aqui no chat para vocês. Deixa eu parar de compartilhar rapidinho. O link para a gente se encontrar aqui nessa plataforma, no Miro. E quem tiver qualquer problema, pode colocar aqui no chat, que a gente ajuda. Mas se não conseguir entrar também, tá tudo certo, porque você pode descrever aqui o que é uma economia que considera o bem-estar para as pessoas e para o planeta. Aqui no chat a gente vai também jogar para lá em formato de post-it também. Então, vamos lá. Já estou vendo várias pessoas por aqui. Deixa eu compartilhar para a gente ver juntos. Todo mundo entrando. Muito bom. E aí aqui está a questão, né? Para a gente lembrar, uma economia que considera o bem-estar das pessoas e do planeta significa que a nossa nuvem vai se montando. Boa, lembre-se que aqui também tem o baú, se alguma imagem te interessar, pode pegar do baú e trazer para cá. Pode compartilhar referências, links. Deixa eu travar aqui. Boa. E aí, enquanto isso também, eu vou pedir para algumas pessoas irem compartilhando o porquê que escolheu a certa imagem, ou o que é essa economia de bem-estar para vocês, e eu vou facilitando aqui para no final a gente ter uma nuvem de palavras legal. Então, eu vou parar de compartilhar e vou mexendo ali na nuvem, enquanto a gente escolhe alguém para vir falar aqui e contar um pouquinho o que é uma economia de bem-estar das pessoas do planeta para vocês. Então, quem quiser comentar aqui, abrir o microfone e falar, eu vou pedir para levantar a mão, e aí a gente vai escolhendo vocês, vai vendo aqui quem levantou a mão, e vamos dar o espaço para a gente se conhecer um pouquinho, trocar um pouquinho. Então, esse é o momento da gente se conhecer, não tenham vergonha, podem levantar a mão, e vamos lá. Oi, Yara, tudo bom?
Tudo bom, gente?
Tudo bem, bom dia.
Bom dia.
Bem-vinda.
Prazer enorme
Conta
estar
pra
aqui.
mim, o que é uma economia que considera o bem-estar das pessoas e do planeta para você?
Eu acho que é uma economia que parte do princípio que a noção de bem-estar ela varia muito através das culturas e que essa ligação ontológica, né, com quem nós somos de forma sensível e pré-intelectualidade, né, intelectualidade orgânica é essencialmente uma fonte de inspiração para políticas públicas, para novas formas de economia, para o empreendedorismo. Eu sou CEO de uma empresa de inovação e sustentabilidade e a gente parte do princípio que a decolonialidade é um caminho muito importante para a gente pensar a sustentabilidade hoje. Então, acho que uma nova economia vê a cultura popular, que foi, por isso eu botei ali o Bumba Meu Boi, a contribuição das teorias de mudança que nascem nos movimentos populares, né, de defesa das florestas, como o movimento dos seringueiros, do qual eu sou orgulhosamente terceira geração, não como uma coisa bonita que ficou na história, não como uma conjunção das estrelas que se alinharam e permitiram que criações artísticas nascessem ou que pessoas criassem movimentos sociais, mas como fonte de inovação, como fonte de bem-estar, como fonte de cultura, como fonte de teorias de mudança que sejam aplicáveis, tecnologias sociais mesmo, né? E como tecnologias podem ser ajustadas, podem ser melhoradas, podem ser customizadas. inclusive na Web3, que é onde a nossa Terra mais atua hoje.
Muito obrigada, Yara. Obrigada por compartilhar um pouco do seu trabalho também, para a gente se conhecer melhor. E aí, quem quer ir depois? Amanda! Amanda, querida, tudo bom? Chega mais para a gente conversar. Oi, Amanda, agora você pode abrir o microfone.
Boa, eu estava tentando abrir meu microfone, mas acho que não estava indo, estava aparecendo o host não está permitindo. Mas que bom que deu certo. Bom dia a todos, todas e todos. Meu nome é Amanda, sou fundadora do Instituto Perifa Sustentável. E para mim, uma economia circular, eu peguei uma foto de um homem negro comendo um prato de arroz. Hoje a gente tem mais de 33 milhões de pessoas passando fome. E eu sou da periferia, sou da Brasilândia, e entendo que não dá para a gente discutir nada se a nossa barriga está roncando. E às vezes é complexo esse lugar, porque ao mesmo tempo que estou no Instituto Perifa Sustentável, também sou jovem embaixadora da ONU, então represento parte da juventude brasileira desses fóruns multilaterais de tomada de decisão. E eu lembro, nossa, um episódio que me deixou bem frustrada, na COP 26 em Glasgow. Eu lembro que eu estava participando de um painel, tipo, só homem branco falando de carro elétrico. E eu estava muito incomodada, porque é uma discussão que é parte da nossa realidade, mas num jeito tão elitista, tão distante. Então, para mim, ter uma economia circular ressoa muito do que a Yara falou. A gente trazer essa lente da decolonialidade. Como que a gente vai olhando os processos históricos que marcaram a nossa população, entende que o nosso discurso precisa ser pautado em raça, gênero e classe. Eu estou lendo um livro, vou até aproveitar para indicar, porque acho que deveria ser livro de cabeceira de todo mundo que está aqui, que é muito bom. Chama Uma Ecologia Decolonial, do Malcolm Ferdinand. E ele ajuda a gente a desenvolver essa visão, assim, tirando um pouco desse eurocentrismo e vendo outras formas da gente construir esse novo futuro.
Obrigada, Amanda. Obrigada por compartilhar para a gente. Acho que a gente tem tempo para ouvir mais uma pessoa. Então, se mais alguém quiser falar alguma coisa sobre economia, o que é economia de bem-estar do planeta para vocês, temos tempo para mais uma voz. E, enquanto isso, também podemos ir olhando as imagens que estão se formando, que eu estou ajudando a organizar lá. Oi, Aline, tudo bem?
Olá, me escutam?
Sim, te escutamos. Bem-vinda, Aline.
Obrigada.
O que está
Meu
passando?
nome é Aline. Obrigada. Meu nome é Aline, eu sou advogada e pesquisadora. E eu escolhi uma imagem ali que representa a PEC das empregadas domésticas, né, quando a gente vai pensar em uma economia regenerativa, a economia do cuidado. Acho que é muito importante a gente pensar que a economia ela vai acontecer em relações muito assimétricas, e que a gente precisa pensar formas de mudar essas regras do jogo pela legislação também, e saber que ela não é suficiente, né? Então, a gente tem uma questão importante, recente, que é uma presunção pela Lei de Liberdade Econômica, de que todos os contratos se presumem simétricos, né? Que as partes estão no mesmo pé de igualdade para negociar, e isso não é verdade. Então, acho que é muito importante para a gente pensar na economia regenerativa, de cuidado, formas de diminuir essa assimetria, né? Pensando aí para que a gente possa gerar mais justiça nas relações.
Obrigada, Lili, muito obrigada por compartilhar. Gente, muito obrigada por terem participado, 3 mulheres maravilhosas aqui, com uma visão linda para compartilhar com a gente, e acho que é isso mesmo, né, a gente tem que trazer aqui cada um com o seu saber e cada um com o seu ponto de vista que se soma, né, numa pluriversalidade de saberes, aonde a gente entende o valor e entende que são várias economias ali que estão se entrelaçando, e que essa é a beleza aqui do que a gente quer trazer. Bom, eu vou parar de falar aqui para a gente ir para a aula do Stewart. Eu vou, no final do encontro, compartilhar com vocês, então, o nosso mural. Ele está aqui, eu vou só mostrar uma última vez. Ele está aqui cheio de imagens, então eu vou organizar ele para ele ficar mais bonitinho, e no final eu mostro para vocês como que ficou o nosso sentimento aí imagético em torno dessa nova economia. Mas agora eu vou passar a voz e o palco aqui do evento para a Marina e para o Samuel. A Marina ela é cientista política, pós-graduada em gestão pública, com mais de 10 anos de atuação no setor público, no terceiro setor. Ela faz parte do time global do Wellbeing Economy Alliance e ela lidera a área, né, de narrativas culturais e construção do movimento na América Latina e é co-líder do Wellbeing Economy Alliance no Brasil. O Samuel Emílio, ele é fundador do Diário Antirracista, ele é engenheiro, foi coordenador de políticas públicas na Educa Afro, coordenador nacional do movimento Acredito e coordenador de diversidade e inclusão na tribo. E hoje ele atua como associate na Imaginable Futures. Essa dupla incrível vai facilitar aqui a aula e o encontro com o Stewart, então eu vou passar a palavra para eles e a gente se vê mais tarde. Um beijo, Marina e Samuca, é com vocês.
Bom dia, pessoal. Prazer estar aqui com todo mundo. E uma honra estar aqui nessa mesa ao lado de duas pessoas que eu admiro muito, o Samuel e o Stewart. Samuel, acho que você pode dar um...
Bom dia, gente. Bom estar aqui com vocês. A Má vai apresentar o Stewart e mais tarde eu entro de novo.
Até pelo tempo aqui, eu vou fazer uma apresentação muito rápida do Stewart e deixar para ele contar um pouco mais sobre essa trajetória maravilhosa dele na área de transformação econômica, mas só para dizer que ele é um grande mentor também e um pensador super visionário sobre transformação econômica sistêmica. Ele é cofundador do Wellbeing Economy Alliance, ele saiu da sua aposentadoria também para ajudar a dirigir a organização, hoje ele é conselheiro executivo também da organização. Foi diretor do New Economics Foundation no Reino Unido por 12 anos, diretor internacional também da Oxfam no Reino Unido, responsável pelas ações emergenciais, pelo desenvolvimento de políticas públicas no mundo todo durante 10 anos. Teve uma passagem também longa pelo Banco Mundial e pelo setor privado, onde ele dirigiu uma empresa com mais de 1.000 funcionários. Ele tem um mestrado em economia e negócios na Universidade de Cambridge, é doutor honorário da Universidade de Lancaster e recebeu um título do governo britânico como oficial de mais excelente ordem do Império Britânico pelo seu serviço à Oxfam. E é também um autor do livro recém-publicado, A Finer Future. Ele mora hoje na Inglaterra com seu parceiro, 2 cachorros grandes, e é um ótimo fotógrafo desse pequeno paraíso que ele criou ali. Vou passar a palavra para o Stewart. E agora, a partir desse momento, então, vou fazer também a virada de chave para o inglês, para a gente fazer essa condução do painel com o Stewart em inglês, e ele será traduzido a português também para todos os participantes que estiverem nessa modalidade. Welcome, Stewart. It's a pleasure to have you here. And I will pass the mic to you to start your presentation.
Thank you, Marina, and thank you, Samuel. And thank you, Marcel and Thijs as well. But also thank all of you for being here. Olá, bom dia. My Portuguese pronunciation is very poor, so forgive me, but it's really wonderful to be with you. And it was very inspirational hearing the 3 of you talking about your pictures and talking as you all 3 of you did. And the first thing I want to say is I'm only sorry I couldn't listen to you for a couple of hours or be in the same room as you, because it's so much better before one gives a talk to get to know people, to understand, to learn a bit about who you are, where you're coming from, what your concerns are. And it's only possible to do that a very little bit today. So please forgive me if something I say is not clear. Do ask in the questions. And also please forgive me if anything is insensitive or I get the wrong tone, because obviously I don't know you all, but I'm so pleased to be here with you. And today I'm going to cover 3 things. Why we need a different economic system, why it's not enough just to do a few things around the edges to make improvements, why we need systemic change. Secondly, what type of change we need. And what I'm going to tell you, I'm going to talk about the wellbeing economy, but as I'll tell you, it covers quite a lot of other areas like the donut economy, regenerative economy, degrowth economy. We're very similar. And what's so exciting is that there is a different alternative to the current system, and it's already starting to happen. And that leads me to the third thing I'm going to talk about, which is how we make it happen. Because, and I think that is also exciting. So initially, I'm going to tell you why we need it, and that's bound to be depressing because it points out all the problems. But actually, my whole talk is one from a spirit of optimism that there's clarity about what we need to change to, and optimism that that change is actually happening. And most importantly, my key message for today, you can help make it happen. It requires all of us, it requires leadership, and this group of wonderful leaders that you are exactly the sort of group that can make this happen. So this is just the start, but what I want to do is hopefully inspire you that change is not only possible, but that you're a key part of that change. So before I start, just a little bit about my own journey. I'm somebody who perhaps against the norm has got more radical as I got older. I grew up in a very middle-class family in the middle of England with pretty conventional views. I graduated as a geologist from Cambridge University. I went to work for Rio Tinto Inc., who you may have heard of, a mining company that hasn't always got the best reputation, and worked as a geologist. And then, as Marina said, I went to business school, and from there did quite a lot of economics and went to work as an industrial economist in East Asia, working for the World Bank. So I was actually based in Washington, but working on East Asia, working on late 70s, early 80s, this dates me, on economic change in countries like Korea, Indonesia, Philippines, etc. But the early stages of the so-called Asian tigers. I then went to work back in business in the UK for 9 years. And as Marina said, I had the quite difficult job of trying to turn around, be the leader of a 1,000-person company. And I learned so much in that process where it required all those 1,000 people to be involved. It wasn't just about a small group. And then I got back to my heart, to where I wanted to be. And I'll explain a bit why I had to make some of those transitions. So I went to work for Oxfam as their international director, managing about 2,500 people around the world in 70 different countries, and managing Oxfam's emergency development and policy work for Oxfam Great Britain. Then spent 13 years at the New Economics Foundation, and then, as Marina's already told you, I retired to write, to lecture, to do a bit of academic work, and to look after our 20-acre smallholding here in Devon. And thought, right, well, I've done my bit. Now's the time to enjoy, still make a contribution, but enjoy things. And then Trump happened, and Brexit happened, Bolsonaro happened, and I thought, no, I can't still stay doing what I've been doing, lovely as it is. We've got to help catalyze a movement for economic change, and I'll come back to why that. But I've had two, perhaps, aha moments or light bulb moments, I'm not sure what the best expression is, in my life, which have really changed the course of it fundamentally. The first was brought on by a tragedy, because my first wife died very young, when she was 31, leaving me with a 1-year-old child and a 3-year-old child. And for a couple of years, I was so angry at the world. I just felt this was so unfair. The fates were against me, all the things you'd expect somebody to feel in grief and anger. And just one day, and this sounds so trite, so simple, it just came to me almost like a flash that I could either carry on feeling angry and destroy myself, probably not help my children, or I could try and do something worthwhile in life and try and change things. And that led me down largely the path I've taken since, and particularly why I went to Oxfam and New Economics Foundation. But the second aha moment, which has also really affected me, was when I was at Oxfam, and we were specialists in providing water and sanitation in emergencies. And it was the time of the Rwandan genocide in 1994. And we had already provided water to around 200,000 refugees in Uganda in camps, and then to 500,000 refugees in Tanzania. And we got a call saying that 1 million people had just crossed the border from Rwanda into what was then Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And these 1 million people were camped on a lava flow 50 miles from the nearest town and 30 miles from the nearest water supply. And a cholera epidemic set in, and people were dying at a rate of 3,000 a day. It was one of the most virulent cholera epidemics in the 20th century. And we had no money left as an organization, and we had no water engineers left, but we went out anyway to do what we could to help. And the French army was there, the German army was there, the Americans were there, and they all said they'll get the water to the 1 million people. But people were carrying on dying in huge numbers, and it was like a very bad dream to be involved in that. And we just realized that nobody had the capacity to do this, and that nobody was taking leadership. And so a small group of us got together and said, we've got to do this. And so we persuaded our organization to borrow a lot of money quickly, to put out a global appeal. And we put out a global appeal, which raised £25 million within 2 weeks, brought in water engineers from across the world. And we had water flowing to 1 million people on that lava flow within 2 weeks, or less than 2 weeks. And that action saved about 50 to 70,000 lives, all the research said. Now, why do I tell you that tale? Well, 2 reasons. One, because sometimes, 2 reasons. Yeah, first of all, because there was no market for that, for providing water to some of the poorest or most disadvantaged people on Earth in an emergency. And it became clearer and clearer that was yet another flaw in the economic system we had. But secondly, because when a cause is just and enough people believe something's possible, the impossible comes possible. And that's what I want to leave you with today. It is possible to change things. And we never believed it was possible to do that, but it's nothing wonderful about Oxfam, but it was the fact that so many people became behind it, so many people donated, so many people provided what we needed, so many people provided water engineers, people flew in from all over the world to help. And the impossible is possible. So that's a key message that I want to leave you. If the cause is good and enough of us work together. So let's move to the why. Why do we need a new economic system? I'm going to be very brief here because I believe, and I put it bluntly, our current economic system is morally and intellectually bankrupt. It's both. And the way I characterize it, it's done lots of good things for lots of people, but it has 4 systemic and interlinked flaws. And I use 4 U's, letter U, to explain that. It's unsustainable, it's unfair, it's unstable, and it's making far too many people unhappy. I don't really need to explain those. Unsustainable is climate change, biodiversity loss, all the things that go with that. Unfair, you know the statistics about how wealth and power are distributed. Unstable, we keep seeing more and more crises, whether they're currency crises, individual crises, even the way the COVID pandemic shut down so many economies. And unhappy, that's perhaps the most frightening of all. People don't feel heard, don't feel they're of value in many economies, don't feel they have a voice, they feel discriminated against. Now, if you just think about that last thing for a minute, we're running faster and faster. We're burning up our planet and our ecosystems. We're working in a system that keeps toppling over, that keeps having crises. And we're causing massive inequality and all the harms that go with that. Not solving poverty in many places. And not even making ourselves any happier with all that activity. That's pretty stupid. We can do better. So, and I sometimes characterize the current economic system as a rather rusty old car. And neither the brake or the accelerator work anymore. So if you did manage to get your foot on the accelerator and get growth burning away in the way it does currently, you'll just burn up the planet and our climate and our ecosystems even faster. But if you try and slam your foot on the brake, you make more and more people redundant, out of work, perhaps even increase inequality. Neither the brake or the accelerator work anymore. We need a different model. And that's where I'll turn from the gloomy stuff to the good news, because that model is both available and possible. So let me now start sharing my screen in a second. I'll just get the presentation up and working, hopefully. Let me see. Sorry, I need to go back. Sorry, I haven't. Can people see that now? Yep, can you see that? Ooh.
It seems like it's loading still, but you're already sharing your screen.
Is it? Can you see now?
I still can't see it.
Oh, that's strange.
Yeah, not yet.
Let me.
It's just dark. Yeah.
Let me go back. Sorry, I don't know what's happened here. It worked earlier. I'll come back. Can anybody see that?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, good. It seems to be taking a long time to load. I think I got too many of these up because they kept disappearing.
Yeah, we can see now.
Sorry, just trying to get the slideshow to play though. Sorry, everybody, it just worked earlier. My computer seems to have gone into, oh dear. Why does it do this to us? I can't get it to play, unfortunately. It's just jamming. Oh no. I'm going to just try one other thing. Sorry, everybody. Can you see that any better?
Stuart, I can try to share my screen.
Can you try that, Marina, please? Yeah, because I think I've got too many, they kept disappearing, so there's now too many things up and my computer's overloading. I can't get rid of it. Sorry, everybody. Let's see, we can change the system, but we can't get screen sharing going. So. Any luck, Marina?
I think it will work. Here we go. Can everyone see the?
Yeah, good.
Yeah. Great.
So if you can do slideshow, can you play them for me?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So what I'm going to talk about, brilliant. I'm going to talk about is a crucial new alternative that's already happening. And what is this? At its simplest, a well-being economy is one that delivers social justice. There we are, brilliant. Social justice and flourishing of all life on a healthy planet. If we go on to the next one, Marina, be great. What it is, again, to go a bit more detail, if you start off, you can see that dignity. It's a system that meets the needs of everyone before the wants of a few. It's a system, if we go on to fairness, it's a system that provides justice in all its dimensions at the heart of the economic system, but particularly it's about a just distribution of not just income and wealth, but time and power. It's a system, if you go on to participation, that's locally rooted and where people have a say and a sense of control over their economy. It's a system where, on purpose, when we talk about purpose, where all institutions and businesses are designed to serve the common good. And when we come to nature, above all, perhaps, it's a system that works within both global and local ecological limits, and a system that reveres and regenerates the natural world and all life. So as we say here, humans are at one with nature and we give back as much as we take from the earth. Now, these goals and needs aren't new. You find them if you talk to indigenous people in many parts of the world. You find them in the writings of many faiths. You find them in lots of journals talking about the latest in neuroscience and what humans need. And you find them most importantly, when you ask people almost anywhere in the world what people say they need in their own lives. So we call these the 5 needs. And people all across the world have been saying this for a long time. They're not new. What is perhaps new is a growing realization and agreement across lots of different people in lots of different parts of the world. These are the things we all need. And these are common to the well-being economy, but they're also common to a donut economy, a degrowth economy, a regenerative economy, and many other words we use in different parts of the planet to talk about this type of economy. And if we go on, Marina, to the next one, please. The current system is we get the economy to grow bigger. We don't worry too much about the damage it does to people or the environment. We then try and take a chunk of taxes and we channel some of that money to helping people on the planet cope with the inequality, the ecological harm, etc. Now, in the minute, when we did a bit of research on a couple of economies, most economies are spending about 20% of their gross national product trying and failing to solve the problems they've caused in the first place. That's stupid. So if we go to the next slide, what a well-being economy does is it moves from relying on fixing, healing, and redistributing. Redistribution is very good, but what's even better is get it right in the first place. And you can see here, equality, equity, liberation. Liberation is getting it right in the first place. And what's that mean? If we look at the types of policies, I'll come to that one in a sec, Marina. Stay with there for a sec. If we look at the types of policies needed to get things right in the first place, we use, again, I have 4 U's for the problems. For the types of policies and the types of practices we need, we can use 4 P's: purpose, pre-distribution, prevention, and people-powered. So just to give you some idea, and the key thing to say is there's not one wellbeing economy. A wellbeing economy has to be created by people in the place where they are and according to their needs. There's not one obvious solution. There's not one set of policies that works everywhere, but there's some general principles that are important, and the 4 Ps can give you an idea. So a wellbeing economy, as you set as your goals of your economy, that meeting those 5 needs and getting it right straight away. So your measurement systems, your budgeting, your resource allocation systems all have to be focused on what you actually want. It's not about the minute most economies are set up so they focus on increasing GDP and then get into discussions about how you both sort the problems out you've caused and how you distribute that GDP. Wrong. You set the goals you actually want in human terms, that people have enough to live in comfort, safety, and happy, that the economy regenerates the natural world. You set those things first, and then you look at how you deal with the political problems. You've got to have the first goals in the first place. And the same thing applies to businesses. We need very different models of business, and Marcelo was talking about some of those in his introduction. But that means that all businesses need a charter of what they're trying to do in the world. You need different ownership models. You need the DNA built in to them that they create just good jobs and that they regenerate the planet. It needs to be built in the DNA. And profit then becomes a means to an end, not an end. So you need different goals for your economy and different models of business. Pre-distribution really means getting it right first time. So it means things like universal public services or basic income or living wages or job guarantees. There's lots of different ways you can get people having enough to live in comfort, safety and happiness. Shorter working week, citizens' wealth funds, inheritance funds, radically different global economic system. You get things right first off. Prevention, it means, again, managing markets, managing oligopoly, managing monopoly. It means managing how your markets and how what resources you use. It means shifting to being much more focused on resource productivity rather than just labor productivity. It means pollution charges, carbon fees, and again, a radically different global economic system. And people-powered, I said before that people need to feel they have a sense of control over their economic system and a say. So it means citizens' assembly, it means local democracy, it means economic democracy. These are just some of the policies. There's not time to cover all the types of policies that work in different places. But this is still a market economy, still a market economic system, but a mixture with public, private, and third sector actors, still as we do. But it's a market system that will operate to very different goals, very different values, very different principles, and very different institutions. So that's terribly briefly describe a well-being economy. Purpose, pre-distribution, prevention, people-powered, and getting it right first time. If we go on, Marina, please. So how do we make it happen? And this comes to why we set up WEAll in the first place. Because as those of you who are operating within civil society and NGOs know that many NGOs focus very rightly on doing really good research, or they focus on really good community work, good practical demonstration of what works. They focus on great communications, really exciting, funky. They focus on lobbying, which trying to really get different policies adopted by politicians, and they focus on campaigning. Those are all critical. But if we move on to the next slide, please, Marina. If we want system change, those things are all necessary, but they're not sufficient. And if you look at some of the really successful system changes, you look at the civil rights movement in the US, if you look at Me Too, if you look at the anti-slavery movement, you see that four other strategies are also really important. You need to create new power. System change is all about power, and that means radical collaboration, people working together across geographies, across levels, across sectors. You need to create new stories, a compelling vision or narrative, narratives of hope. And those, you get plenty of false stories, but these need to be based on who we are as humans and what humans say they want across the world. And then you need to support these with a coherent and accessible knowledge and evidence base. You need to democratize the knowledge that's out there. And obviously, you need to find transformation opportunities following major crises, because that's often a time where change is even more possible. And the good news is that if you look at the economic system change in the 20th century, in the sort of richer nations of the world, you had two big changes. You had a change to Keynesianism in mid-century, with a much greater focus on the role of government, health, education, etc. And then you had a shift to neoliberalism in late century, in 70s, 80s, 90s, with a much greater focus on the role of the market, free markets, freedom of the individual, etc. And neoliberalism is still predominating as our economic system now. But in each of those cases, we can see that both the economic system was changed twice in the 20th century in market economies. And secondly, we can see that, again, this same sort of strategy of creating new power and compelling stories worked. Now, in the case of the neoliberals, it was an elite power base. That won't work for people trying to change the system now. It requires millions of hearts, hands, and heads working together. And secondly, the neoliberals, I believe, created a false narrative, of free markets being the answer, freedom of the individual, small government being the answer. And I don't believe that it fits with who we are as humans. So that's why we set up WEAll, to help catalyze those types of new strategies, and to help catalyze new power bases coming together and people working together in radical collaboration. If we go on to the next slide, please, Marina. In only 5 years, I've been amazed, and we've been amazed by how many people want to work together. It's still, at one level, it's amazing. Another level, it's tiny. We're still at the start. But 370, nearer 400 actually now, organizational members globally have joined WEAll. Thousands of individual members growing all the time. And I'll show you in a minute all sorts of other actions happening. If we go on, please, Marina. Already 5 governments, we're slightly out of date, but unfortunately 2 of these leaders, Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand and Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland, have changed their leadership. But these 5 governments, with Canada recently joining them, are a group of governments that we instigated them getting together. They now run their own small organization called the Wellbeing Economy Governments Partnership. And they are committed to creating a well-being economy. And somewhere like New Zealand's already done 4 well-being budgets. Iceland and Scotland have a framework of well-being indicators that they're aiming for. Somewhere like Finland has put a huge focus on pre-distribution. That's why they're beating the world in education and childcare provision. And already there's evidence that these governments, certainly 2 or 3 of them, tackled the COVID epidemic much better because they were already focused on human well-being rather than just on GDP growth. If we go on, please, Marina. We also realize can't just come down to governments. Power requires people working across sectors, across levels, to say they want something very different. And already we got a number of 11, 12 established WEAll hubs, including in Brazil, and a number of others launching soon, and they're listed down the side. And actually there's probably about another 20 or 30 being talked about. And if you just take one example, and we can chat about Brazil, but WEAll Scotland, for example, you've got in there, you've got businesses, B corporations, you've got people from government, you've got people from civil society, from community groups, from the church, from environmental groups, from the university. You've got people right across society that are saying, we want something different and we're going to work together to make it happen. And that's what I hear from Marina and others is starting to happen in Brazil, and why this group of people coming together in MUDA is such a wonderful grouping, because it requires difference. It requires people working who are doing in very different spheres to start saying, we want to work together, we want to change things. If we go on terribly quickly, please, Marina. We put out a whole range of briefing papers, and there's all sorts of ways we've been disseminating that knowledge. You can see all these papers on our website, weall.org. Please have a look at it. But if we go on as well, please, Marina. One that we're very proud of is the Wellbeing Economy Policy Design Guide, where we've worked with about 70 different members and individuals to co-create this. And this is the whole way we operate. We need to co-create things to outline not just possible policies to develop, but how to do that. Because the how in a well-being economy is as important as the what. And we can't stress that enough. And that's starting to happen. It's really, we've piloted that guide in a number of countries. We're just going on for a second round. Again, the enthusiasm of people right across the planet for this type of economy, or a donut economy, or a regenerative economy, is just wonderful. If we go on, please, Marina. I mentioned very briefly stories. We've got a lot of work to do on that still. We can describe the story of why things are not working, but we ultimately have to really paint a vision. And some of the things are becoming clearer, but they need to be translated, put in very different ways. But the economy isn't something separate to us. It's us, unpredictable motion, human us. It's not a black box. It's not a mechanical thing. It's us working together as our economy. And another message that's coming loud and clear is we're part of nature and we depend on it. We're not separate. We're not in charge. We're not better. And if we go on, please, Marina. I'm only going to throw this out very briefly, but if it's so easy, any of us are talking about this, to see this as something slightly different from any of us. And those WEAll needs are very nice to talk about, but it's hard. So if we shift those round, and if I was asking each of you, and won't be time, sadly, to do that in any detail today, does your organization, business, or economy provide everybody with what's needed to live a life of dignity and purpose? Does your economy, organize business, restore, protect, and cherish the natural environment? Does it principally value its activities and behaviors by their contribution to social and ecological well-being, and is therefore profit and means to an end rather than an end in itself? Is it designed to ensure a just distribution of income, wealth, power, and time? And is it shaped and formed locally, rooted and determined by people's active voices? As you go through and as you work together, please ask yourselves those questions about your organization and about your wider economy you're part of. They're not easy. None of us are all doing all those things. The organizations I've worked with in the past couldn't say they were doing all those things. But we've got to have a vision, and we've got to work together to make that vision happen. And all these things are totally possible. And that really brings me to the last slide, which is that this vision is bold, it's vital, and it's entirely possible. But it does require us to live differently. If we did this, and we're part on the way to doing this, then we're talking about a post-patriarchy, a post-colonial, a post-anthropocentric, and in the simple terms of capitalism not being a market economy, but capitalism being the type definition of capitalism being about the power and wealth of the holders of private capital as the ultimate arbiters. It's a post-capitalist economy. It's a market economy, but a post-capitalist economy. This is possible, but it's only possible if all of you, for instance, in Brazil, start really working together. And if we can do that, and we can work with other people across the world as well, then what I'm talking about is I'm cautiously optimistic that we can make it happen. And that's the challenge I'd like to leave with you for the rest of your course. How do the 40 or 50 of you working together on this course work together to make this happen? Thank you.
Thank you, Stewart. Very lovely and deep. And I wonder if we have time to questions. Let me just double check it with our.
Yes, please.
And I'm so sorry that we had those technical problems and lost 5 minutes in the way.
No, but first, I would really. I would like to say thank you, because at least for me, it was very interesting to see this globally hub taking place. And I didn't know about all of these governments. Marina has shared with me, but I didn't realize how big it is and how this is coming to Brazil. There is a question in the chat. I wonder if I can, oh, we have time. Great. So I'll start with one question from Yara Vicente. She said, my question is how the Brazil Hub preparations are going on and what type of actions are being coordinated across hubs.
Okay.
And if I may add, specifically in Brazil, we have this context where the whole country and our democracy process was based on racism, exploitation, oppression, and this is still going on. If you are born in a rich family in Brazil, you can live until you're 30 without meeting one single family who is facing a lack of food or some restriction of food, as Amanda shared in the beginning of the session. So it's very hard for people to relate. It's different from your story on the beginning where you said, you know, I went there in the field and I saw people dying because they didn't have water. In Brazil, you can't see people dying because they don't have water. You can't relate with them. So if I could add, what are the learnings that the Brazil Hub has about how to contextualize this to Brazil?
I mean, I ought to ask Marina perhaps to start, because, but what I will say, in my times in Oxfam, I sadly was only able to come to Brazil, I think twice, and I've been also since, but I spent some time in the Northeast region at a time when there was a very bad drought, going up into the going a few hundred miles inland from Recife, up in the northeast, and there you see a very different Brazil than you see in Recife or many parts, and there were families living in very bad poverty, and I've seen similar in other parts of the world. So obviously that the Oxfam work I did was a lot in places like Africa and Latin America in development work, not just emergency work. And so I have some understanding, but of course every situation is different. But more generally with hubs, and I'll let Marina say a bit about the Brazil hub quickly. As I say, it's people working across levels of society that are necessary, and so we want, and that's can be very compelling to governments when people from very different backgrounds come together and say we want change, and that rather than from just one group that's been campaigning. And the thing we're trying to do with hubs globally, though, is learn from each other, because I don't believe for a second that we have in sort of the global north, it's always difficult to get the right terms, or in the minority world, whereas I would say you're in the majority world. I don't believe that we have the answers. There's so much we need to learn from how you do things, how indigenous people have done things, how different people do things in Latin America. So there's no sense in WEAll that we've got, from the Scottish hub or the New Zealand hub, that we've got the answers and we want to pass these to the Brazilian hub. Just the opposite. And we're not going to get a wellbeing economy and a decolonized economy unless this is really a global effort, because there is, and as you've already said, Samuel, within Brazil, there's such a still a colonial hierarchy, there's still a power hierarchy. Of course there is, massive. So these are big issues. Marina, would you like to say a bit more? Because I can't speak with any sentiment about what the Brazil hub is doing, but I know Marina can say just a tiny bit, please.
Yeah, well, just in a few sentences, the Brazil hub was officially formed in early 2022, and we have a group already of several organizations that have joined us and are working together to advocate for economic systems transformation in Brazil. And more than actually saying what we've accomplished, because it is a very new project, I want to invite everyone who's here into this conversation. And I hope that we can explore this further during our time together. We participated in a few events already, speaking about economic innovation in Rio, and we are very much seeing this political moment as well with the new government as a really big opportunity to start tackling transversal, interconnected economic issues and implement, I would say, some of these macro policies that Stewart mentioned in terms of prevention, predistribution, and so forth. So I will leave it more as an open invitation here for this conversation to continue. Yeah.
I see very interesting questions in the chat as well. I don't know which ones you'd like me to address, if any.
I think Andrea and Priscilla have similar questions. If you wanted to address these two about relationships of power and how to engage the majority of leaders, which is a big challenge.
Andrea and Priscilla, this is obviously difficult, and that's why leadership matters, and why power matters, but very crudely, when you look at other systemic change, and this is a very crude type of analysis because it varies totally in different countries, but often social scientists say that within any society, there is probably somewhere between 5 and 20% of people who know things are wrong and are prepared to work together to change them. There's then quite a large mass of people who feel very uneasy, might know in themselves that things are wrong, but are so busy trying to stay alive or look after their children or cope or work their job that they haven't got the capacity to engage at this moment. Or they're people who are bombarded by the social media messages of fame, wealth, etc., that can be, or this is, and the sort of models we get of success on the television or in the social media. And so there's perhaps about 60% of people who are like that. And then there's about 20% who are very happy with the system as they are. Some of them are obviously in leadership positions. Many of them are in positions of power. Many are very wealthy, and who want to keep things as they are. And one has to think in terms of power. But what system change theory says, though, is once there is a narrative of hope, because that's why these stories are really important, and once that group of people who know things are wrong and prepared to act, once you get that first 5 or 10 or 15% of people working together, then you start to get some of the norms and the laws changed, and then more people come behind it, or families become behind it, and you get a tipping point in society. So it does come down to leadership of those who know things are wrong and are prepared to put their heads above the parapet and say, we want to change things. And that's why radical collaboration is needed. If we look at why we haven't had, many of the things I've talked about today have been around a long time. But what I see now is a much greater willingness in civil society, in business, in academia, of the people to work together with people not like themselves to change things. And that's what we need. We need radical collaboration. It needs power. And there's no alternative to that, because otherwise you, I, or any of us can go to endless conferences, we can write papers, we can give speeches. But unless there is enough people mobilized in that vanguard of who know things are wrong and are prepared to collaborate with each other, and that doesn't mean just out on the streets, that's one way, but it means people working together actively, changing their organizations, putting their head up and say, we want something different. That's the only way that change happens, that and a compelling story that talks to people, it's their truth. So it's going to be different in each place, but that's the big challenge. And the only way through it is really collaborating together and working together. I wish I could wave a magic wand and say, but
yeah, I've been seeing a lot of questions too on the chat about, timing and how long it would take for such a transformation to occur. And at the same time that we have, pressing, especially climatic and social issues. Yeah. São Paulo is just is facing a really difficult situation right now due to heavy rains, and a lot of people died and lost their homes and are displaced. So to ease, I guess, people's anxiety here as well, how long does it take? We know we have to do things right now, but is it possible to think about a transformation still within our generations?
Yes, yeah, definitely. And if you look at some of the other transformations that happened, definitely possible within a generation, maybe quicker. We don't know. I mean, there's two things that that can happen. And this is, and my optimistic says the first will happen. The first is that enough of us work together that we get change within a 10-year period or something like that. Because we've seen even in WEAll how much people have come together in 5 years. We never thought it possible to have 400 global organizations working together. these hubs growing up everywhere, these new stories coming out. So that's just one grouping of people. That's lots of other changes happening, lots of other places. We need to link those changes. So yes, in 5 or 10 years, it's possible. If we fail, the risks of climate change and biodiversity loss are pretty scary. They really, you know, I don't want to minimize those. I think we know that. We know that there's tipping points out there in our systems, and we know that if we don't act, all sorts of, you know, could be pretty horrible. But if it does, if the worst came to the worst, again, it's critical that enough of us are saying there is this alternative. But it's far better to get the alternative without catastrophe on the way than and avoid that. And I think it's possible. So, you know, 80% of the time I get out of bed in the morning, think, yeah, we can do it. 10% or 20%, I struggle. And I think if only human, we're like that. So all I can say is, as we, you know, hold your doubts, we all have them. We all get out of bed on the wrong side, but this is possible. And I think possible within 10 years or 15 years, 10, I think. Let's go for 10.
I really hope you are fully right.
Yeah, let's all hope. We have to sort of dance and think, yeah, we do. But I think these things can take off.
Yeah.
Nobody thought the Soviet Union, the second world superpower, would collapse in the way it did. These things can change very quickly. And if enough of us work together, we can make this positive change happen quickly. But it does require, as I'm getting boring now, it requires radical collaboration. And it requires thinking differently. But, you know, don't think small changes aren't important. But we've got, you know, you've got to have two things at once. You've got to have your feet on the ground, but you've got to be shooting for the stars at the same time. And you've got to have a vision and a hope, but also be very pragmatic. Those two aren't different to each other. They're part of the same thing.
Thank you, Stuart. We have one more question here. I don't know if we have time. But I'll ask.
I'm okay for time, whether you guys are.
But there is something from Eduardo about this risk of cooptation of the sustainability agenda. I think in the past 4 years, we faced a lot of authoritarian force in Brazil.
Yeah.
And this may come from that.
Eduardo, I think, I'd be dishonest if I didn't say already we see it. So we've seen greenwashing, we've seen in different places, and we're starting to see well-being washing. You know, people are very good at taking, who don't want systemic change, of picking up bits of the agenda and saying, you know, we've made a big change. That's a risk. And that's why I put those challenges on the table, you know, that last slide of mine. And by the way, we're welcome to share any of these slides with everybody, please do. But those challenges have to force us to keep saying, because, you know, we felt very excited when 5, now 6 countries said they want to be wellbeing economies. But yes, they're budgeting better, they're doing things differently, it's made a difference to people's lives already. But are they fully wellbeing economies? No, of course they're not yet. It requires much more than just saying we're a wellbeing economy or a wellbeing company. You know, how many companies say we care about our employees and actually don't give a whatever? Sorry, I mustn't use rude words on this. But so we have to have our eyes wide open, Eduardo, because people will. And it's actually almost a sign of success that when people get worried enough about something different, then they'll start attacking it, some people. So yeah, let the attacks happen. We'll fight back. And I don't mean, because I use the word fight, I use the word power, but we're fighting, let's not forget, with a very different view of what it means to be human. And you know, it's a very uneconomic thing for me to say, but this change requires love. It requires all parts of us. It requires our head, but it requires our emotions as well, because the economy isn't something separate. You know, the economy, the word comes from the ancient Greek oikos nomos, management of the household, and we want our households to be managed well in a way that works with nature and part of nature, but also with love. So I don't mind using that word because I think it's important. This is who we are as humans, and this is, you know, we can, and how we live with each other, and we can live differently. So, thank you. I like the hearts. Yeah.
Thank you, Stewart. Just wanted to check in with the organizers since we ran a bit over, if whether or not we have time for any other question, or if we should
Thais
just
shared the message. Yeah, Thais shared with me that we are running out of time.
All right.
Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry we had the technical problem, but hey.
No need to apologize.
No
Totally
need.
fine.
Yes. Thank you so much, Stewart, for all the answers and for your wonderful presentation. We can definitely share with the participants your slides as well today.
And well, thank you, all of you. And I'm sorry, it'd been lovely to have even longer, but I hope you both find this work together really interesting and really productive. I feel very hopeful just from the comments, the questions, just seeing a few of you. I think what you can do together is amazing. And, you know, back to never let that sense that, you know, that's why I talked about that example in Rwanda and Zaire. The impossible sometimes is possible. And that's when we know something's right and we work together for it. So
absolutely,
however difficult things are in the future, don't give up, keep working together. And I look forward so much to hearing both how the Brazil Hub goes and how both this grouping goes, because I have great hopes for you. And I look forward to learning from you guys in the future. So,
great. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Stewart.
Thank you, Samuel. Thank
See
you.
you.
Thais, back to you then.
Go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. Thank you, Marina. Thank you, Stewart, for this wonderful time together. And thank you for sharing all your research, right? It takes a lot of time and effort to put some research into making the work you've done for so many years. So thank you for sharing it with us. I'm going to transition back to português. Então, vou voltar aqui a falar português. Muito obrigada pela participação de todos. Eu vou colocar aqui no chat a imagem, né, a nossa nuvem de imagens compilada para vocês darem uma olhada, mas a gente também compartilha no grupo de WhatsApp por e-mail com vocês. E vou dar a palavra final dos agradecimentos para fechar esse evento incrível de hoje, de volta para o Marcel, para trazer os agradecimentos e fechar o nosso evento. Marcel, a palavra está com você.
Obrigado, Thais. É até difícil fechar esse encontro de hoje, depois desse papo com o Stewart, não só pela inspiração dele, mas fica aquele gostinho de quero mais, queremos mais, Stewart. Então, a gente já se sente, eu diria, convidados a te chamar mais uma vez, para a gente poder continuar essa conversa em algum momento. Então, muito obrigado, Stewart. E a sua fala sobre ser possível me lembra muito aquele quote do Mandela, que fala que tudo parece impossível até que é feito, né? Então, e aí se torna possível. Então, muito, muito bom. Eu queria destacar só uma coisa antes da gente encerrar da fala do Stewart, que para nós, líderes sistêmicos, para esse grupo, para os agentes MUDA, isso é muito forte. Acho que aquela imagem que o Stewart nos traz sobre as 4 estratégias para a mudança sistêmica, eu destacaria como uma ferramenta muito importante, muito poderosa para a gente levar do nosso encontro de hoje, né? Então, criar novos bases de poder ou de poderes, acho que esse primeiro ponto é muito importante e é muito do que nós vamos fazer na próxima semana com a nossa imersão, com a construção desses vínculos, e a gente poder encontrar novas formas de distribuir poderes e de distribuir lideranças. O segundo ponto que o Stewart nos traz, que é promover uma nova narrativa e que ela seja atraente, isso é muito importante, né? Acho que nos carece, sobretudo para movimentos como os nossos, movimentos que muitos de vocês também atuam, que estão na fronteira da inovação. É muito difícil a gente construir uma linguagem que verdadeiramente atraia e que impacte o mainstream, que impacte e que mova ponteiros na grande massa, né? Então, a gente geralmente fala para os convertidos, eventualmente a gente consegue falar para aqueles que mudam por conveniência, mas aqueles que mudam por constrangimento é mais difícil. Então, eu deixo até uma recomendação também do Robert Shiller, né, Nobel da Economia, que tem estudado muito sobre a economia da narrativa, né? Eu acho que isso é algo muito poderoso também para a gente poder aprofundar. E o terceiro ponto que a Stewart traz, que é muito importante, acho que é a construção de conhecimento acessível e evidência, né? O Brasil tem uma cultura que não é necessariamente positiva, de políticas públicas não baseadas em evidência, né? Que é bem diferente de outros lugares. Então, como é que a gente pode, nesse grupo, mostrar as evidências vindo da sociedade civil, as evidências vindo do mercado, as evidências empíricas já de outras políticas públicas, por exemplo, um Bolsa Família, que tem evidência concreta de que políticas de transferência de renda com condicionalidade, sim, reduzem pobreza, sim, reduzem desigualdade, mas como é que a gente pode aprimorar a partir disso? Então, a gente tem, sim, instrumentos e recursos muito poderosos nesse grupo para poder construir esse conhecimento e essas evidências. E, por fim, o quarto elemento da estratégia que o Stewart nos compartilha, né, de transformar as crises em oportunidades. Eu acho que a pandemia realmente nos escancarou, né, nos mostrou as falhas estruturais, sistêmicas que nós temos. Então, acho que eu me inspiro muito numa das falas recentes do presidente Lula, ainda em campanha, quando ele disse que são nas grandes as grandes crises são as parteiras das grandes revoluções. E é exatamente essa fala do Stewart que eu acho que é importante para a gente, num momento tão difícil que a gente vive, né? Seja no momento da inovação, do nosso compromisso com a democracia, seja na enorme crise de desigualdade que a gente vive, na emergência climática que a gente está vivenciando todos os dias e com eventos cada vez mais extremos. Eu acho que é encontrar quais são essas oportunidades de transformação, e a gente vai emergir um pouco mais nisso na próxima semana. Então, eu queria fechar com esse destaque dos 4 elementos da estratégia para a mudança sistêmica que o Stewart nos compartilhou, entre tantas outras coisas, que eu acho que é extremamente instrumental para a gente pensar o nosso trabalho. Então, muito obrigado, Stewart. Queria agradecer também o time da Dynamo Lab, aqui com o Ricardo, Maria Helena e todo o time Dynamo conectado. Agradecer o Sense Lab com a Thais aqui na nossa facilitação, que tem nos apoiado muito com conteúdo de metodologia. A UpLab, o time da UpLab, que tem nos apoiado muito aqui com comunicação, posicionamento, mobilização. A WEAll Brasil, o Sistema B Brasil, a Choca, a Economia da Comunhão e a Agro Social por nos apoiarem a chegar e mobilizar lideranças como vocês, ao Instituto Helda Gerdau, que tornou tudo isso possível, e ao Centro de Empreendedorismo e Novos Negócios da Fundação Getúlio Vargas, que está se aproximando muito desse conteúdo. Também agradecer a Aramos, a WEAll Editora, a P2 Vídeos, o Guilherme Baboni, nosso post técnico, a Fernanda pela tradução e, em especial, a Marina e o Samuel pela facilitação desse diálogo entre o Stewart e as lideranças sistêmicas. Então, eu fico por aqui e a gente se vê na próxima semana. E, antes disso, outros encontros assíncronos vocês receberão. Então, muito obrigado e tenham todos uma ótima semana.
Tchau, obrigada, pessoal. Daqui a pouco a gente se encontra ao vivo. Bye, Stewart. Thank you for being with us.
Bye.